So let's now begin with Amy Dean. I'm speaking with Amy Dean, who is co-author with David Reynolds of A New Deal, How Regional Activism Will Reshape the American Labor Movement. From 1993 to 2003, she served as president and CEO of the South Bay AFL-CIO Labor Council. Her article, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of 2010, currently appears in the Huffington Post. Welcome, Amy Dean.
My pleasure to be here.
And even though, as you say in your article in the Huffington Post, The Good, the Bad, and Ugly of 2010, it's been a rough year for progressives, what do you think will happen in 11? Will 2011 be even worse, given the nature of the Republican Congress?
Well, what we've seen from this last week in the Congress, the president has had a series of victories that equal, in this last week, more than almost the entire term of his administration. He was successful in getting a majority vote on the START treaty, not insignificant. Don't ask, don't tell. A recent rumor that he is going to urge the board, the National Labor Relations Act, the National Labor Relations Board, to issue a warning to employers about abusing the rights of workers to organize. All of a sudden, we've seen a flurry of things come out of the White House in the last week. I would say the difference here is that the president has finally decided to really throw down and to really use the stature of the White House and the executive office to push for more. And so the last week has really been a huge change of events. I think the challenge for this president is twofold. When he went out on the campaign trail, he said something to progressives that we've not heard in decades. And that is, we had a candidate running for office speaking the language of justice. We hadn't heard that for so long, that our expectations were really peaked. And I think there was a series of expectations created not only by promises and commitments, but the whole framework he used to talk about the change needed in America. And so when you put that forward, then you increase people's expectations, number one. Number two, I think for progressives, this is the second Democratic office holder that we've had in the last couple of decades, Bill Clinton being the first, where we, on the outset of election, were so excited to find out very shortly into the candidacy that the country has moved so far to the right, the center has moved so far to the right, that the political space and will for Democratic candidates is really small. And so absent a president and even elected congressional and Senate leaders, for that matter, seeing that their job, in order to be successful, has to be to increase the capacity of the base, because in the absence of giving an enhanced capacity to the base, they don't have the political space and will for reform.
So, Amy Dean, what explains the fact that, and it is a fact that the country has moved to the right, yet everything that's happened politically, you would think, would move the country to the left? The total failure of our capitalist system, the near-death experience brought about by Wall Street speculators, who've all but destroyed the global economy, and now they've been rewarded for their recklessness and profligacy, and Main Street is languishing. The president has for the first time ever addressed the terrible healthcare situation in this country, where we spend more money than any other developed country on healthcare, but have the worst outcomes. All of the broad indicators of what's happening in the real world, you would think, would be able to galvanize a progressive and left-wing movement in this country to recognize that they're right, the other side is wrong, and yet the people who are wrong won the last election.
I think that the social infrastructure of this country has been so unraveled that there is very little organized institutional base left. And what do I mean by that? The labor movement has so seen its numbers erode in this country. America's social safety net has so eroded. The public sector has very minimal role to play these days, given that it's been so dismantled by decades of Republican rule. As a result, the institutions that used to play a countervailing force in capitalism to create a more fair and just and compassionate America have really been dismantled. That combined with globalization, which has allowed for capital to roam the globe freely with no counterpart of social or political power, the combination of globalization and the decline of our social infrastructure really means that a president, on his or her own, has very little political space and will for reform. I mean, they can use the bully pulpit should they choose, but the levers of government on their own are minimal. And so to be able to once again create the space for labor to grow its role in the economy and for us to rebuild popular organization again in this country is something very critical to the relationship of any elected official's ability to move real reform.
So why do the working people in this country continue to vote for people who don't care about them and only care about the top 1%?
Well, I think, we have a whole series of historical examples, whether it's this country or others, where people aren't always voting in their self-interest. And the takeaway lesson, either from historical examples or for the current one in this last midterm election, is that the underlying fear, when people are not feeling secure, when people are not feeling enfranchised, when people do not feel any sense of reliance, lots of ugly behavior emerges from all of us. We're human. It's a part of human nature. When we are threatened, we don't often act in our best interest. We don't often act our best. And so the takeaway from this midterm election, what's so important is that in order to build any kind of common sense of purpose again in America, we have to be able to get at the issue of economic enfranchisement. Because until people are secure in that regard, it's very difficult to count on people's enfranchisement and making decisions around common good and common purpose. And so whatever we take away from this last election cycle, it ought to be that we need economic strategies that allow people to once again have jobs. It's not just jobs. It's not just an issue of jobs. It's an issue of the quality of jobs. And that jobs should pay a living wage. People should have the right to bargain with their employer. And people should have the right over self-determination in their employment. And we need to make, again, unions in this country legal so that people can build a sense of reliance again between themselves and their employer.